Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LocoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Conlon, owner of Team LocoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com. All right, and we are back with Coach Karina.
Hey guys.
And this podcast is going to be all about hunger. So there's so many ways that we could tackle this, but we wanted to distinguish. Yeah. This is my fourth podcast today, all right?
And honestly, you're doing way better than I thought you'd be doing. Not an insult.
So
I was like, rude. I would not be this put together.
You should have just seen us before this. So yeah, understandable. But we're going to distinguish physiological and psychological hunger, and then we're also going to talk about just kind of how to manage hunger, and then talk through some of the most common situations that clients deal with. And I also asked, I put a little question box up on Instagram, and there was so many of the same themes, and it's all the stuff that we've all struggled with before. So we're going to touch on all of those facets, but let's kick it off with the broccoli test.
Yeah, so
Karina's favorite analogy.
Okay, honestly, I don't remember where I got this because I've been using it.
I feel like it's made up.
It probably is made up, and I was probably like, okay, I feel like this is going to work. Honestly, I have no idea if it actually works for everyone. It's something I suggest, and then sometimes it works, and then obviously for different reasons.
Do you actually do this? I thought it was like a hypothetical.
Like myself. I used to.
Oh.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
I'm questioning my broccoli test.
I really am. I thought this was just like a hypothetical.
No, this is real.
Just mention on
this is a real thing.
Bags of broccoli.
Okay, so the podcast is about hunger. I feel like establishing physical from psychological hunger is something I talk to clients about 100 times a day on a weekly basis because for different reasons, people might, we have a very important hunger question in our check-ins. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's like, I can't tell if I'm physically hungry or psychologically hungry. And so I think it'd be important to distinguish, what does physical hunger look like? Very common cues are like you can actually hear your stomach growling, right? You might feel like hypoglycemic, a little bit dizzy, shaky, tired.
Empty.
Yeah, empty, shakiness. Irritable is a good one as well when you're actually hungry. But psychological hunger often stems from things like just being bored. You might have had a very restrictive past. They're more so tied to craving specific foods rather than just wanting to satisfy that feeling of hunger. Instead of satisfying hunger, you just want to satisfy a taste or like a crave for a taste. So I typically will explain that. But to try to solve this easily, I'll say, okay, let's try something I call the raw broccoli test. And basically it's like, okay, next time you're questioning whether you're actually physically hungry or whether you're just eating because you're bored or you're just psychologically hungry, see if you are hungry enough to eat raw broccoli. Because if you're hungry enough to eat raw broccoli, who enjoys raw broccoli? Like by itself, like no butter, no like salt or seasoning, not many people. Or it doesn't have to be broccoli, just whatever raw vegetable you wouldn't normally eat. You would only eat it if you're actually really hungry. If you're hungry enough to eat that raw broccoli, then that's probably physical hunger. If eating that raw broccoli gives you some sort of physical relief, then your body needed those calories, it needed those nutrients, you're definitely in a deficit in that moment. But if you are not hungry enough to have that raw broccoli, or you're really just focused on one specific food, like I'm hungry enough for like these cookies or like this bag of pretzels and that's all I really want, then I would say that is more psychological hunger. Again, more so tied toward a specific food, a specific taste, a specific craving. And I kind of also use the analogy of, okay, are you eating to live or living to eat? Like, are you eating in that moment to, like I said, kind of soothe those physiological symptoms of, growling stomach, shakiness, hypoglycemic feeling? Or are you just kind of bored? Or do you want to satisfy a taste? what else can we do in this moment to kind of distract ourselves from that focus of, I really just want this chocolate chip cookie right now.
And you don't know this feeling very well, but especially like with like prepping so many times, right? Like the end of like a really harsh diet, like that hunger, it's such a different hunger, right? Like it is inescapable. It is inescapable is a really good word, and especially for me. So I'm somebody who I'm very impacted by hunger when I diet, and everybody has different things that they're impacted by the most. That is one of my like very strongest feelings. And it really does feel inescapable. Like it is like 24/7 all day.
You're always hungry.
You wake up, you go to bed, like it doesn't change. It doesn't matter what you eat, what you drink. And that, when we talk about there's these two hormones, leptin and ghrelin, and leptin is tied with body fat. So when you have low levels of body fat, you have low levels of leptin, which is the satiety hormone for all intents and purposes. So there is physiological reasons why. So you're really, really just low body fat, and your body doesn't want to be there because it's too low for you naturally to stay. So it's doing everything it can to try. Like I literally feel like I've been in bed before where like I feel like my body is trying to like get me out of bed to go get food.
You start levitating.
Like I'm just literally
Conjuring movie.
I'm actually possessed. I think I have a sleep demon though because my aura ring.
God.
No, seriously, dude, I'm not kidding.
I would believe this based on the stories Ryan told me.
Dude,
I think Lauren is actually possessed in her sleep.
Okay, not kidding. So there are some nights that I'm like knocked out, and there are other nights that if I look at like the ring, literally, like if anybody's seen like the Oura Ring or the Fitbit or whatever, like my stuff is like off the charts. Like I'm awake, and there's many times where Rai says like I will like literally sit up in bed and I will start talking or like yelling, and I'm like, what is the sleep paralysis monster? Like I don't know, it's suffocating.
Maybe you sleepwalk.
Well, I don't open any doors. I must close them perfectly. I don't know. Like it's just, I'm not like that lady on TikTok who's just like eating snacks and throwing things. Anyways, I am probably possessed. It's fine. But what was I saying then?
I don't know.
Levitating out of bed. Yeah, so
hungry.
That's where it started. I just
Because honestly, all the years of prepping, I'm possessed by the prep demons at night.
Probably. But there's these times where you're like, it is this inescapable hunger. And that is like the broccoli test. I would be like, yeah, bring it on. Like, I will eat a whole bowl of this just to eat it.
In that situation, you're physically hungry because that's kind of like the point, right? In contest prep, the goal is to be in a deficit. But if say I'm working with someone who has struggled with binge eating in the past.
Yeah, that's really hard to distinguish.
Yeah, has had a very restrictive past, but now we're working toward, okay, let's not have this like all or nothing mentality. Let's practice like listening to our hunger cues and eating when we actually need to eat. Yeah. That's where I feel like that is appropriate
for sure.
And then, that might not work for everyone. Some other tips I typically recommend is just removing or distracting yourself from maybe that situation that is kind of pulling you towards food, especially if it is psychological hunger. Say you're just like kind of hanging out in the kitchen by yourself or hanging out in the living room and you're thinking about going to get some ice cream out of your freezer, but you're not sure if that's something you should go for like a 10-minute walk. Remove yourself from that environment and see
if you get out of the kitchen.
Yeah, see if you get distracted and see if you forget about your quote-unquote hunger altogether. And another thing I typically recommend to people is, okay, let's drink a glass of water, wait 20 minutes, and if you're still pretty hungry after that, then it's probably a good sign that you are like physically hungry. Again, kind of sticking to those first main physical cues, like I said, growling stomach, hypoglycemic, that's your body telling you, hey, like I'm low, like I need some food, and things like that.
And this is where being consistent with, your meals is really helpful as well. Now, doesn't mean you need to eat on a perfect schedule every single day, but having like rough estimates of like when you're going to eat most of your meals can really help keep people on track, especially people who do have a binge eating like past. Because one of the biggest issues that we run into, and anybody I'm sure listening can appreciate, is when you either skip meals or you wait too long between meals and you get that really, really like that intense hunger. That is when things can just snap.
And that's when you can just be like, whatever, I'm so hungry, I'm going to eat everything now. And then that really snowballs.
Yeah.
And that's what we really want to avoid for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
But having like a consistent meal schedule, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but eating, having, okay, I'm going to have about 4 meals today, going to have them around these times. That can really, really help us not get to that point of no return,
right. Yeah. So I truly believe hunger and satiety can also be habitual, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I've talked about this to you personally. I don't think I've talked about it on the podcast, but in my master's program in Dr. Campbell's Science of Physique Enhancement class last semester, we all did this mini experiment where we aimed to do a 30-hour fast. We weren't graded on whether or not we could not eat for 30 hours. We were simply graded on attempting to do it and then documenting why we stopped the fast. I think I made it to 23 hours. I was dying, and everyone was like, oh, why didn't you just do the 24th? And I was I couldn't do it. I just came to a bag of these dried sweet potato slices, and I was like, it's over. I'm just gonna eat these.
Just staring at them for 2 hours.
Yeah. So, but I never thought that I could fast for close to 24 hours. And I think that, I documented a lot of things throughout that period. And the first instances of hunger...
Your diary.
Yeah, your diary.
I hate Dr. Campbell.
The first few instances in which I wanted to eat, I noticed were habitual. Because, I usually eat at 9. So, I wanted to eat even though I would have to ask myself, am I hungry enough to end this fast? Because I'm competitive. And I was like, I know that 2 other people have completed this fast in the entire semester of that course being available in the program. So I'm like, I want to be one of those people. I failed. I didn't make it. But so I kind of realized that, a lot of my hunger is habitual. And kind of the same thing with every time I would come home from class late at night, it was a habit that I created that I would get home super hungry. Mm-hmm. And then I would eat then. But sometimes when I had a snack on my way home, I would still feel this intense drive to eat. Mm-hmm. So, like you said about the meal timing, if we are off on our meal timing and we have not only that physical hunger from fasting for longer than we're normally used to, but then that habitual hunger kind of on top of that, that's going to really make things worse in terms of hunger.
Yeah, and you'd be like, I skipped a meal so I can eat more now.
Yeah.
Or that's again where those behaviors, not that we're saying you have to be perfect with your meal timing or you can't skip meals or you can't, of course that happens, but that idea can then turn into something that we don't want it to turn into because we let it just go too far. I think too that the coming home from work and just kind of or school or whatever, and that just you let that breath out and you're like, oh my god, the day is over.
Serotonin kind of.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something about just everything is finished and the kind of day just kind of comes to a close and everything kind of hits you at once. Because I noticed that too. There will be days that and I think it's also part of a time thing. And I don't know, maybe I'm crazy because if I get home from the office after a certain hour versus if I get home earlier, it doesn't affect me as much. But it's if I'm here to pass a certain period, then I get home and same thing. It's gotta have whatever, and it might not really be any different. But psychologically, there's something going on. It's definitely not physical hunger. It's something psychologically is happening there more so than if I come home earlier. It's very unique.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with so food has a dopaminergic, also serotonin kind of relaxing effect, and then you kind of come home at the end of the day. I want to relax. I want to have some high palatable food, relax, eat some carbs, just kind of chill. So I think that might have something to do with it. Obviously, don't know for sure. But I added this next point on here because I feel like you're a perfect example of this. So, so I wanted to kind of talk about why some people mention, I'm always hungry, mm-hmm. or no matter how much I eat, mm-hmm. I always have this really big appetite. Mm-hmm. And so in some instances, people do have a natural higher drive to eat. They mm-hmm. have bigger appetites than other people, etc. But I also think that some people will say that and then not really take into account you spent the last 8 years of your life not eating or always dieting. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of accumulates into this psychological oh, I just have a really big appetite, I'm always hungry, but you've spent like the last long period of your life dieting, not feeding yourself enough. So I think it like accumulates to like this 24/7 of I need to eat more, I can't stop eating.
Even when you are not in that weight reduced place.
Right, yeah.
Like
when
you can have blown past that.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter. And I definitely, I can certainly agree. And I can so confidently say that now, even now, many years removed from that type of dieting, I still have a big appetite, you know, and it's not like, I mean, it's obviously very different than it used to be because there's less of this like desire, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get that now because I'm going to not have it at some point because I'm not in a position like that. But I definitely still, like, I can sit down and like, I mean, almost anybody can attest, like, I can eat a lot, and it's not like I'm gorging myself. It's not like I'm like trying to make myself sick. Like I'm, you know, and I'm around other people too, and it's funny, like you could, you know, you just see people's behaviors, and there's some people that I know who like literally like no matter what, like they just like don't eat a lot. They eat very dense, like little amounts of food, and they're just like, I'm good, and I'm like, that's not me. Like I can order like multiple things, voluminous things. Like it's just, I'm good, but I'm not. It's not like a bad thing, right? Like it's not like I'm not sitting around like, oh my god, I can't stop thinking about food, I'm so hungry. Like I'm not like that, but if you put food in front of me, like I can certainly eat it.
Like I think
I'm a big person, like Karina mentioned. She's all
tall.
the time.
She's very tall. Has a lot of muscle, moves a lot, is very fidgety, so her body is in
I'm like,
a lot of demand. But so, and I bring that up because you're a good example of you kind of have a higher drive to eat, and I think that's very physiological. You're someone who just physically can always eat, you're hungry. Whereas I'm kind of the opposite right now, but I've had more of that psychological, I'm always hungry. So when we kind of first started hanging out a lot, I would be able to keep up with you and like throw down, right? But now I'm like, oh god, like I can't eat that much. And it's because obviously before, a few years ago, like I had spent so much time dieting, I spent so much time restricting, and I would be able to eat so much, and I always had like this high drive to eat, but it was more so
like certain foods too, though. It wasn't everything.
Yeah, no, it wasn't everything. It was like certain foods like I had to have, and I could never have enough of it, and I was quote unquote always hungry, like I always have a big appetite. Whereas I spent the last 2+ years now just actually eating enough and not being overly restrictive. And I've noticed that my appetite has reduced like drastically, whereas I was always like cleaning my plate, and now it's pretty often that I like leave something because I just can't do it. So
see, I'll leave stuff like if I'm out, obviously not if I'm at home. Like if I'm at home, I'm making enough food to eat.
Not wasting food.
Not wasting food at home. But like if I'm out at a restaurant, I could certainly eat pretty much everything, right? But there are times where if the portions are really big, or if there's a lot of something like obviously like the carbs.
You're just practicing healthy restraint.
I can practice restraint, but I'm not doing that because like, oh my gosh, I'm so full. I'm just like, oh, I'm good. I mean, I'm full, but like I can still eat.
I don't need
but
to push it.
I'm good. Yeah, I don't need to. But then like bring the ice cream out and it's
that dessert stomach is always.
My dessert stomach is very large.
I will say dessert stomach. I have like 3 maybe, because once I'm full, but if you're like dessert, okay, let's go.
But that's like there's a whole research line on that, which is always like the sensory specific satiety, which I always find super interesting. Like the dessert stomach is a real phenomenon. It's not like a fake thing that like people, I mean, obviously it's not a literal second stomach, but the idea, like I might have one, but
the idea that you're automatically like not full anymore when you have a different taste.
Basically, if you say you've had a lot of savory or a lot of salty, which most people would have for like a regular meal, then you have something sweet, like you have stopped, like they've done research with this with like ad libitum feeding, so you can eat as much as you want, you know what I mean? And then as soon as they bring something out that has a different flavor or a different flavor profile, you will eat more. Or if they have a variety, so say they have like, they've done some studies with like yogurt, so it was like all, I don't know, strawberry yogurt, right? Or there was 4 different types of yogurt. So same food, but like 4 different flavors, like peach, blueberry, vanilla, whatever. People will eat more when there is a variety. So it just, it is sensory specific, and that's why like that idea of like this like second stomach, or the idea of like when you go to like a buffet and there's like a million different things there, and then you're like, why do I eat so much? Or whatever. It's because there's so many different options and there's so many different things to taste and to try.
in my head, I'm like, okay, that's where like the bro science picked up on like the meal plans and only eating like 3 foods.
No, there is,
yeah,
there actually is research on like limiting the variety in your diet will actually improve your results and your adherence, and it makes sense because when
at the end of my preps, I'm not messing around. Like I'm just keeping things like very consistent.
Shit's super consistent, and all for many reasons.
Yeah,
just for like literally caloric intake as well. Like just eating the same stuff.
Yeah. Okay, and then I think it would be good to kind of talk about managing hunger in fat loss phases or contest preps. We already talked about like how important meal timing is in that context, but I would say specifically protein timing, right? Because protein is the most satiating macro, and if you are smart about spacing your protein throughout the day, that's a really easy way to make sure that you're not front loading all your protein in the morning and then you're like starving at the end of the day.
Yeah, an issue I see clients run into is they get really hungry, so they'll eat everything. They're like, oh, I'm done at like 4 o'clock. And I'm like,
oh my god.
No. Like here's the thing, you're still going to be
unless
hungry.
you're going to bed at like 7 because you have to wake up at 3.
Yeah, but like you're still going to be hungry even if you finish eating like earlier or later. So why we're literally setting yourself up for like binge. Because now you have all these hours before bed where you're probably you're still hungry. You know what I mean? Like you finish your food, but you're still hungry.
Yeah.
So we might as well space it out. Now there is a point where I do think, and I've talked about this before, like is having some type of feeding window. I think could be helpful, like mentally. And again, it doesn't have to be like this hard rule. It's kind of like the meal timing. Like, all right, I normally eat my meals around this time. Especially when I'm dieting, I'm like, okay, I like to start eating and finish eating around these times, because then it kind of gives me that mental note, like, all right, the feeding window is over for today. Like, I can be hungry all I want, but I'm not going back in the kitchen. I'm not going to rummage through things, because that's where we kind of run into trouble, where you're like, I'm just gonna go in the kitchen right now. And then you kind of like open the pantry. I'm just gonna look at this, and then
I'm just gonna smell it.
You're just gonna kind of look at it.
It accidentally ends up in my mouth.
And and then you're like looking around. And we've all done that. You know what I mean? They're like, I need to go scrub this pan, which is ironically next to the peanut butter and the rice cake. Like it doesn't make logical sense, but in the moment it does. So for me, having that little like cap, like, all right, it's 7:30, I'm done. If I want anything, I'll I don't know, make a tea, or if I, chew a piece of gum, have more water, or just nothing, actually, because one thing with hunger, in my opinion, is when you focus too much on it in a deficit, you become hungry. Like, you become so fixated on the hunger that you actually think about food. You become more food focused. It's like, if you go into any type of deficit, understand and expect hunger.
Yeah.
And if you expect it, doesn't mean that it's easier, but you're less obsessed with it, I feel like.
Yeah.
When you're always trying to have like 18 fucking diet drinks and chew a million pieces of gum and like, how many pickles can I have because there's no calories and I can chew on, like, it just becomes too much. And have a pickle because you want one, or have like a whatever fucking sparkling ice that you have, or whatever. Like, have this, like, that's okay. Yeah. But when you become obsessed with it, then it becomes this almost compulsive pattern to where it's never enough, and it's not going to be enough because you're in a deficit. That means it's working. So it's just one of those things, I think, that mentally you get better at the more that you do it, I think. It never makes it super easy, but I do think that you learn through those things. But one of the biggest things that I found to be helpful is to just stop hyper obsessing over the hunger and just be like, hey, I'm hungry right now. Okay, we're good.
Moving on. Absolutely.
Here we are. It's inescapable.
We talked about meal timing, and then obviously fiber is also, I would say, our next most satiating macro, micro, whatever you want to decide that is.
Water.
Yeah. And then I think it would also be important to talk about why being in tune eventually. So maybe not being in tune with your hunger signals doesn't matter really if you're in a contest prep, because what matters is that you're being adherent to the amounts that we understand are going to put you in a deficit and help you lose body fat. But for people who maybe spent too much time tracking for too long and totally forget how to eat, so kind of moving more so back into that balance, that is not good either. Maybe for individuals who have spent 5+ years tracking, and then are afraid to not track or have anything that they can't track because they don't know how to eat, and they don't know how to listen to how hungry they are. So I think it can be a double-edged sword where if you spend too much time tracking, you don't know how to just eat quote unquote normally, you don't know how to listen to your hunger signals, and then you're either binging or you're not eating at all, and that could be another host of issues.
Yeah, and I think part of that, and I actually just spoke about this today earlier, was what often ends up happening with tracking is people basically, instead of using it as a tool to learn more about the food that they're eating, they just completely dissociate from all of that outside of the numbers.
Yeah.
And this is really, really particularly bad when people are only using the app, and I understand that apps make it easier for a lot of people, but you're only using that, and then if somebody were to take it away, you'd be like, what's in this? I don't even know. Like, you should be able to know what's in all of your food, even if it's an estimate. Like, you should be able to look at a plate of food. It doesn't matter where you are. If you've been tracking, for this example, for 5 years, even for a year, if you've been tracking for over a year, you should be able to look at a plate and estimate. It might not be perfect, but it's going to be within the ballpark. And if you're saying that after a year of tracking you can't do that, that's because you don't trust yourself. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
There's no other logical reason why that wouldn't happen. You know what I mean? Because
I don't think 1,000 calories is gonna just like sneak up on you.
Yeah. like if it you have to be realistic, but you can't be like, oh, this cheesecake is like
200 calories.
Yeah, like come
relax.
On. Like okay, you know, we have to be realistic here, you know. So it's not about being delusional, but it is about saying like, all right, this has roughly this in it, and if I don't really know, it probably has a little extra. Like you just have to kind of go with that. And I think that actually has, you know, one of the problems that we're uncovering with the neurotic tracking that we try to work so much with clients on and like get this message out, because it really is just not useful, and it really is creating these same crutches. It's basically just a crutch that like people can't get away from, and it should be a teaching tool and not a crutch.
Yeah, I feel like we've been saying this for like the past few years, but now it's like being harped on a lot louder, and I'm seeing other people say these things, whereas like macros are just a tool. They're not something that anyone should be tracking for the rest of their life 24/7. But so like Lauren mentioned, she had put out a poll on her story or question box asking you guys, when or how do you struggle with hunger? And so we kind of picked the top most common ones. Number one being at night before bed. And we've kind of suggested that this could be due to what I call diet PTSD. And then maybe some...
It's in the DSM.
Yeah.
The new edition.
Snacking. Yeah. So diet PTSD is something that I've kind of coined and have experienced because when I went through my very first severe contest prep, one thing that I remember to this day was just how hungry I went to bed every single night and just didn't sleep because I was so hungry for so many hours throughout the night. And then once that diet was over and I struggled for 3+ years after with binge eating, one thing that I could not shake for a while was just not being able to eat something right before bed. Like, didn't matter how full I was.
I was like, dude, what?
Yeah, it didn't matter.
I gotta eat it in bed. I'm like,
yeah, like I had to eat it like under the covers, like in bed. Like I had to be satiated minutes before I fell asleep. Didn't matter how full I was, like I had to have something.
So specific.
Yeah, no. And so like, but it felt almost like,
it's a ritual. It's like almost like a ritual, right?
Yeah,
like,
but no matter how hard I tried, even if I was so full and I was like, okay, like I'm gonna try to go to sleep, I would have that feeling, like we mentioned previously, like my body getting pulled to the kitchen to have something sweet in order for me to fall asleep. And
the
so,
demons.
Yeah, the demons, the habits that I created, but it was more so, I started with big binge eating episodes before bed, kind of eased into, okay, like I'm not binging before bed anymore, but I have to have something even if I don't need it. And then turned into, I can't fall asleep unless I have something sweet before bed, and now that's completely gone. But I think that like quote unquote like diet PTSD is a thing of just like being starving all night before bed and having issues with going to bed with even a chance that I could be hungry.
Yeah, and I think that's again one of those things that you just have to, as you do this for longer and you evolve and you kind of like mature through your diet, not calorie deficit, but just like mature through your diet phases, you realize like, okay, I might be hungry, and then I'm gonna wake up and I can eat, right? Like, like it becomes so much easier. But like when you're in the throes of it, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't think of anything else. I can't even imagine going to sleep hungry, you know?
Yeah.
So obviously there's ways that we can adjust this, but I would say that that's, you know, making sure first and foremost, again, if you're not in a calorie deficit, obviously, you know, making sure that you are eating enough, like earlier in the day. And then just kind of setting those things up and those parameters, like, you know, no, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna have this breakfast. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm going to like remove myself from the kitchen. I'm going to shut my bedroom door. Like, I'm gonna get here. It doesn't matter if I lay awake forever. You know, like, you will fall asleep and everything will be like, you just have to kind of like break that pattern too. Of course, eat dinner and stuff before. Like, don't like eat dinner at 4 o'clock and then wonder why you're hungry before bed. Yeah. You know, have it at a normal amount. But the mindless snacking, I think, really, really is common, just because, again, people are coming home and let's say like before bed, they're like watching something, like they're watching a movie or they're watching a show, they just grab some snacks and they're just eating it. It's like this very mindless munching, you know, and we've all been there with certain, you know, foods.
Yeah. Or if like someone else in the house is eating something.
Yeah, if it's just around, you know, and you just,
like, oh, I want some.
Oh, I'll have some of this. And, you know, so it's just really easy. Like if it's, you know, if it's out, if it's like on the counter or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that is just something that, you know, you have to understand your environment and set that up a little bit more conducively so that, you know, not to say that you can never have snacks again, but just being mindful. And if it is something like that you struggle with, like I know a lot of people would be like, oh, if it's in a bag, like it's like game over, right? Well, then just, you know, put it in a smaller portion, you know, actually just put it in like a little bowl. Yeah. And then that way, okay, you already have it here, or get like single serving things, like for like popcorn, right? Like get like the 100-calorie popcorn, and then you can make that and you can eat it out of the bag, but now you have like a contained amount. I know for me, like my whole thing, which I've talked about a million times, is ice cream. Like ice cream is like my like no portion control. Like it's just something that I can eat the whole thing and like have really no issue. So for me, if I'm getting it out of like this huge carton, certainly can I restrain myself? Like, yeah, but it's like, it's just that one thing that I'm like, you know, it's just easier for me to either like go get it out, or I'm gonna keep stuff around the house that is like the lower calorie, whatever, that I actually like, not like this stuff that tastes terrible that people convince themselves to taste good. There's a few things that, like Yasso bars and like
Zero. Does anyone remember that?
We used to be like, yeah, this is good.
This is so good.
So good.
I'm dying.
Stomach just like explodes from all of like the chemicals.
I haven't seen that. Maybe it went out of business.
No, I think
good, because that stuff is disgusting.
I think they did. Oh, I feel bad for them though. But I mean, they should have. I think they did try to rebrand, but I think it was so. I think not honestly, good. So many other companies came out, and
it's like the Halo stuff.
And all that. Like I think the Enlightened stuff, garbage as well. It tastes like plastic.
I really like the Yasso bars.
Oh yeah, Yasso bars the tit. So like Yasso bars and Skinny Cow, like I'm all about. So for me, it's like, all right, I really like ice cream, but I also really like these. So I'm gonna keep these. And then if I want to get like real ice cream, more indulgent ice cream, like I go out and I get it. And like that's what I just most of the time do, because if I get the whole big ass Publix thing, guess whose fat ass is eating that every night? Mine. So it's like, you know, just one of those things, like I restrain myself, and everything else, that's one that I'm like, you know, I spend a lot of mental energy during the day. I don't need to worry about this too.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not because I can't do it. It's just like, I'm just setting my environment up to be better.
Right. Yeah.
So if somebody was like, held a gun in my head, like, you can't eat all this ice cream, of course I can restrain myself, but it's like.
So why make it hard on yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa. Oh.
The light just went out.
Okay.
In our room. So if you're watching this, get a little light show. But if you're listening, that's what that O is for.
Oh, I wonder if this is what this room is like, very sketched with the lighting.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think there is a ghost in here trying to connect with
us. It's the sleep demon. He's back.
Because that light started flickering.
He's hungry.
Anyways, let's hurry up and finish this because now I'm getting nervous. Number 2, boredom and loneliness.
You're like really concerned.
I just watched all 3 Conjurings in 1 week.
Whose fault is that?
Mine, because I had nothing else to do. Just kidding, I have plenty to do.
I'm like,
but because I saw the 3rd one in a movie with a friend, and I was like, well, now I have to watch the first 2. So now Lauren is trying to turn the light back on. Oh, okay. All right. So, second point is boredom and loneliness, and I think this would tie. Sorry, I'm just wondering if they heard that in the background.
Shit's fun.
Okay. So next 2 points, and I'm just going to tie them together because they kind of fall under the same category, is when or why we might struggle with hunger. Boredom, loneliness, also going to tie this in with like stress and emotional eating. So responding to emotions with something that makes us feel good, like food. For me, I know that food at one point was like very sedative. Like anytime I was feeling anxious or lonely, tired or bored, I would use food to kind of drown out those feelings, distract me. It's also, dopaminergic and, serotonic. I don't know how, if there's any way to adjectivize that word.
I don't think so.
But anyways, it produces the happy chemicals in your, it produces the happy chemicals in your brain that makes you feel good. And so that's why oftentimes we'll turn to food to respond to these emotions. And what I'll tell clients is, okay, food is your current stress response. There are millions of other stress responses that we just have to rewire the neural pathways in your brain to create new habits with. So instead of turning to food anytime you're bored or lonely or anxious, what's something else we can do? For me personally, I like to go on the Duolingo app and learn some French for like 10 minutes. Or I'll like practice handstands, gymnastic stuff, like in respect to CrossFit, those skills and things like that. Some people who maybe know how to play an instrument, take that time to practice that. Kind of taking like I said earlier, just distracting yourself from that situation, that feeling, and finding a new way to respond.
I feel like, at least the situations that I found myself in, like you can almost feel like when you're about to go over that like edge, and you're like, okay, this is gonna turn sideways, like if I don't like remove myself, and sometimes you don't, and then you end up in that situation. But then if you can get better at like observing those emotions and like knowing what that feels like to be able to stop that before you get there. And usually it's like this very like overwhelmed, like at least for me, like anytime I've had that, it's like this very overwhelmed, like high anxiety state, but like different anxiety, because there's some anxiety that like you don't want to eat anything at all.
Right, yeah, like
but I don't really know, maybe anxiety is not the right word, but it's this very like certain feeling.
For me, it's like sometimes it's like a stress and anxiety that I'm trying to procrastinate away from. And then I'll use food to do that, or I used to use food to kind of distract myself from that. But the next one was when people struggle with hunger, and they talked about like hormonal physiology. So like maybe around your period, that time of month. I typically tell people, we know we can be objective about this. If we understand that hunger signals tend to regulate a bit or circulate a bit higher around our period, we just know that maybe we don't actually need food, but we're just hungrier because that's normal around this time of month.
And it's important too, any type of feedback that we're getting, like if it's the same pattern like every few weeks, right? It's like, hey, like we just need to recognize that this is not how you normally would be feeling. This is based on where we are in your cycle, and everybody's a little bit different, and that's going to be something that like you and the client figure out based on like their feedback. But everybody feels a little bit differently at different times, so it's important to be able to recognize, okay, like this is like you during this period of your cycle, and this is why you're feeling it. It's not because everything changed this week, or we need to make these massive adjustments, or we just need to kind of ride this out. We need to be objective. Hey, this is where we are. Oh, okay. And that like often just kind of calms people down. And sometimes they like forget, because when you're in the midst of it, you're like, what's going on this week? And it's like, hey, this is where we are. And it's like, oh shit, you're right.
Totally. And then the next one was people might struggle more with hunger on active days. So just typically being more active, maybe like training bigger muscle groups. Like people always say, I'm so much hungrier on leg days. Or just being, say you went on like a hike, or you did extra cardio, or you did just something, or you were running around all day, or whatever. Obviously, if you are in a period where you're able to adjust your food, this might make sense. But for most people, things kind of just level out, because there's going to be days, just like there is a high activity day, there's likely a low activity day. So I would say and there's no perfect way to adjust this, but I would say that for most people, I'd rather keep food fairly consistent. I just find that it is easier for most people, instead of just having all these massive ups and downs. The only times I find that to be really helpful are when people have really, really high calories, and it's really hard for them to get that in, or it wouldn't be conducive to get that in every single day.
or really, really low calories and we need to kind of periodize it as far as like refeed, etc. But for everybody else kind of in the middle, I don't really notice many physical changes when we have all those ups and downs. It's more so when we're either very high or very low based on where somebody's at. So I would say if you have that high day, just know, okay, buckle up, today's going to be hungry, and prepare yourself mentally to understand that this is going to be a little bit of a harder day, and you're just going to have to roll with it. Maybe, have some more fluids, have some more volume, or some, I know for me, like when I'm always dieting, like crunch is like a big thing. So like finding things that are like low calorie, that are like crunchy and you can like actually chew, and like carrots, peppers, seaweed, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Also wanted to talk about, so since we are talking about how activity could affect appetite regulation, a recent study that I read, it was a meta-analysis that talked about the correlation of step count with appetite regulation. And they kind of found this U-curved effect of we seem to regulate appetite the most normally if we get around anywhere between like 7.5 and 8,000 steps per day. Anything lower than that, a bit more sedentary, individuals tend to have higher appetites than their body actually needs. And obviously if we're over 8,000 steps per day, that appetite will be a little bit higher than what our body needs. So there is a happy medium. If you're too sedentary, you're likely going to overeat, and then if you're moving way more, obviously that makes sense, right? Because if you're moving more, you're burning more calories, you're going to be naturally hungry. So I thought that was super interesting. And then the last one is individuals who struggle more with hunger while traveling.
And I think this comes down to just being dysregulated in your environment.
Right.
And for some people, traveling is very stressful for them, so that they might actually have less hunger because they're just very, very stressed and they're on edge and they're not really sure. Like, it just depends on the type of travel, of course. Like, if you're on like a fucking vacation, like, I hope you're not stressed traveling, you know what I mean?
Relax.
But if you are, on a, like a work trip or something, like maybe even like with your, traveling with your family, and there's like, you got a bunch of kids, like there could be high stress situations, so that could be one thing. But then also I find, and I don't know why this is, but I've talked to a few clients and they all agree that traveling home and like staying with your family or like being around family can like increase appetite or increase that like snackiness and just like kind of having stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it's just like being home or if it's being in a different environment or it's being around that type of stuff. And obviously this is going to depend on your family. There's a lot of dynamics there. But it is a theme that I see. So I think that traveling can just throw it off either way, like lower or higher, depending on what, where you're going, what the situation might look like.
I think that ties in kind of closely to like boredom as well. So I know clients who talk about going on like really long like road trips. If you're sitting in a car for like 7 hours, it's going to be really hard, like not to munch, or sitting on a plane and they're like handing out all the snacks, right?
So you can't really get up, you can't really move. You're not heating up like a gourmet meal. Like you're probably eating, like just snacking. So road trip snacks are like, that can be a whole different thing. Because then you don't want to like pound drinks either, because then you're stuck. Well, I don't. If it's my road trip, I don't care, because I will stop.
You're stopping anyway.
I'm stopping anyway. Let's be honest. But I am stopping whenever I want. But if you're with other people and you're trying to be nice, kind of limit that. I will just chug drinks. I'm terrible. Like, that's why if I'm flying, like ILC. Always. Like, it's not even like an option. Like, I'm always
Gotta be.
But so there's so much with hunger, and I know this is something that a lot of people obviously struggle with, and we really wanted to touch on some of these key points. So as always, thank you guys for listening. If you have any other questions for us or would like to apply for coaching, you can visit teamlocofit.com. You'll find our coaching application, our newsletter, our articles, and the other podcasts. So thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you next week.